experience like in talent agency sphere and media companies, right? We'll start probably from the basics, right? Tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get to crypto?
Yeah, it's really a great question. So fundamentally speaking, like you said, I'm a lawyer by trade. Have both my Canadian as well as U.S. law degree. And, unfortunately, I probably spent too much time playing video games than I should have been when I was in law school. But that's how I kind of got exposure to the esports and content creator space. Never looked at it all from kind of a business or professional perspective, just became a fan of it. Fast forward a couple of years, of all things, I was actually practicing medical malpractice, really complex obstetrical negligence type stuff, super extreme and not so much fun. But it was kind of a Friday afternoon waiting for the weekend to come when I really just came across an article that did kind of a deep dive into the economics of esports and content creators, something that I had never really considered before. But as I was reading this, what really struck me was the business model seemed very similar to traditional sports in the sense that you have teams, players, and sponsors as kind of key stakeholders that are driving the industry forward. So because of this, and this article that's kind of putting forth all the economics of the space, I began to wonder, did it have the same infrastructure built in that traditional sports does, since it looks a lot like it? And what I mean by that is, let's take a guy like LeBron James. Let's say he signs a contract with the Lakers or an endorsement deal with Nike. Is he himself negotiating those terms and drafting the contracts? No, right? He has a lawyer and agent doing it. So I'm like, this must exist. Took a look, quickly found out that not only was there not really a single law firm or agency operating worldwide, it just kind of, the whole industry as a whole was very kind of unprofessional, so to speak. So for me, saw it as an opportunity to kind of launch my own business from a legal perspective as well as an agency perspective. And me and my business partner both quit our jobs as kind of a corporate lawyers, so to speak, and started this thing. At the time, esports was very much in its infancy. There's very little going on, but it was kind of right place, right time. And what I mean by that, so we launched back in September 2018. And at that time, there's about $170 million invested worldwide into this space. Not a nominal number, but also not so big, considering the next month in October, there was 1.8 billion. And that's when you had Drake and Scooter Braun come in with 100 Thieves. The new Overwatch League slots were announced, as well as a whole host of other celebrity investors. So with that kind of moved esports and content creation, so to speak, from kind of the periphery to mainstream consciousness, and allowed us to scale quite quickly, mostly because we just ended up getting, a lot of press out of it. And to be honest, we weren't experts at the time, and very much it was like, fake it till you make it. And we were able to scale quite quickly. Within 7 months, we were representing over 700 esports teams, players, creators, game developers, and ancillary entities across the ecosystem. And then in April 2019, 7 months later, we actually merged with another agency, which is a subsidiary of Anthem Sports and Entertainment, and rebranded the company to Rumble Gaming. And that's kind of my very long-winded, but somewhat granular way of how I kind of progressed from a medical malpractice lawyer to an esports and content creator agent.
Perfect. This is like a story how I met my mother. In your case, how I met a crypto industry. Okay, so practically, I want to talk about segue a little bit about what's happening right now in Web2 world, right? Because there's a huge wave right now of content creators who are trying to be more decentralized, and they try to control their content. They try to monetize their content because, let's be honest, right now the current platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and even Spotify and many others, they're very much centralized. There are a lot of monopolies there already, and they have a lot of content restrictions. I mean, censorship went to an insane level where such content creators as presidents of countries were banned and censored, right? So we got to this level, which is, and now we understand that there should be a new wave. There should be kind of a different transition into this new world. And in your opinion, working a lot with influencers, so how can content creators expect, what should they expect from Web3?
No, that's really a great question, right? And what, to me, if I were to simplify that question or distill it down to one thing, what Web3 and blockchain as a whole is really doing for influencers, it's allowing them to directly interact with their audience without intermediaries. And that's a huge kind of benefit, mostly because it's really allowing them to own their audience and be able to kind of directly connect with them on a really intimate level, as opposed to having, fundamentally speaking, agents, brands, and all these other things dictating how they work. So when you're looking at it from a metaverse perspective, influencers, they can collaborate with brands in a whole host of new ways, which I think is really significant, most particularly from fully immersive kind of 3D experiences. So as a hypothetical example, let's take an influencer who's focused on exercise and, healthy lifestyles. So what they can do is actually take workouts that they're developing and have a brand sponsor it, wear those kind of, let's say Lululemon as an example, wear that branded clothing within the metaverse, and then invite their fans to join them in that kind of digital workout, we'll call it. So this kind of collaboration, just one, it increases marketing efficiency by channeling kind of promotional efforts to an influencer's most active followers. Because those ones who, as I'm sure, having been in crypto for so long, so many of these followers are either bots, or they're not that engaged, or they follow someone and they don't necessarily participate. But the true fans are the ones who are actually going to be a part of that. So it's a great way to actually see who the real ones are and how I can actively engage with them.
Yeah, that's really true. So we've seen you worked with brands like Red Bull, TikTok, Twitter, like the global brands, right? And all these brands, they're actively preparing for Web3, either already they're participating and doing like some dipping their toes in the water, right? Or integrating into the NFT space or metaverse directly. So in your opinion, what are the new opportunities can the metaverse open to the content creators and specifically to big brands?
Yeah, so I think more importantly, so when to really answer that question, we have to look at how concrete content creators can really increase their value of their audiences. Because what they're doing is by hosting these virtual experiences and then leveraging things like NFTs, which enable influencers and brands to monetize these collaborative endeavors much more kind of, we'll say, significantly. It's just allowing this kind of new area of engagement outside of traditional Web2 means. So let's take even another example where influencers now, they can even digitize themselves and make it so their face is actually relatively unknown. So a lot of influencers that I'm working with are actually using computer generated avatars that appear to be human-like, and they can have all these different qualities, et cetera, et cetera. And they're using these digital avatars to effectively create these new personalities that connect with audiences on a whole new level. So from a brand perspective, you can kind of it's from a brand perspective, it allows them to better evaluate brand safety because of these new personas, which are now enabling them to come into it from a more kind of cautious and easy perspective.
You've touched a very interesting topic that I was reading about, the talent agency that actually generates AI influencers that are becoming much more popular and more engaging because you can imagine they can generate content like faster and more quality
Exactly.
because they process millions or hundreds of millions of data points, right? So what do you think is going to be the future of this? Like how would the agents will like survive with, like, I would say micro influencers as opposed to those massive machines who know everything about the audience?
It's a great question, and I think it's kind of a sad one for me because I think the agency world, so to speak, is not necessarily on the up. Just given the fact that a lot of the power now is being decentralized and given back into the hands of the creators, where they can handle most of those things themselves because they own the distribution channels to their own audiences. So for me, it's not such a good thing. Having said that, though, for the creator, it is a very good thing. And from where I see this going in the future, obviously the technology now is, very much in its infancy, but we're already seeing practical applications on a material level that's showcasing where we're headed. And for me, it's like, okay, maybe it's not in the best place right now, but there's just so much money going into the space and so many smart individuals who are working on it that it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And I think it's sooner than we think for this transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. So Reuters foresees an increasing number of interviews held in the metaverse in 2022. We're already seen examples of from Financial Times where they interviewed Meta's Nick Clegg in the metaverse. I'm sure there's going to be tons of other amazing opportunities there. So in your opinion, like what are the other opportunities for reader engagement, advertising, community building for publishers like Metaverse Insider? Like, and how will you integrate it directly into the metaverse?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And it's really, again, what we're creating here, what the metaverse is creating, is a new form of interactive and immersive experiences. So when you're looking at from an advertiser's perspective, look at traditional advertising. Take linear television or even digital media to some degree, which live streaming has helped to kind of push to the side from an advertising perspective. You have what's called the fourth wall. And that's kind of, if you're watching a commercial on TV, you can't actually directly interact with that brand or the advertiser themselves. But what the metaverse is allowing us to do, it's allowing these brands to break down that fourth wall so that you can actually meaningfully interact. So as an example, which most of your listeners are familiar with, is let's just take Twitch streaming or YouTube streaming. The reason why influencers are generally so popular right now, or one of the top ones, or why they've been able to scale, is because it's allowing you as a fan to directly interact with your favorite influencer. They can connect with you in the comments, they can give you shout outs, they can host you, etc. Where in the past with traditional celebrities like Tom Hanks or Leonardo DiCaprio, there is no such aspect because what's blocking you is you and the movie itself. They're not actually engaging. But this is allowing to on the metaverse side, it's allowing you to directly interact with those brands. So the smart ones are now coming into the metaverse quite quickly and learning those mistakes and how to best kind of leverage those audiences.
Yeah, we agree. So it's becoming more interactive, like a peer-to-peer. And so regarding, I want to dig deeper a little bit regarding the magazines and the news media, right? So you think we will see like the appearance in the metaverse of more newspapers and they're going to transform somehow, right? And then how will the interaction look like, right? For example, how would you interact with your host? Because there's still like a certain level of seniority and a certain level of the roles. There's a host who's controlling, let's say, 80% of the airtime, right? And there is only a small piece of the time when people can actually ask questions.
It's a great question, and it's not an easy one to ask just because the technology is still so far in its infancy, and there's so many ancillary aspects that need to be developed before we can materially answer them. But let's take an example, a practical one like myself, right? So from the Metaverse Insider perspective, right now we're partnering with Sandbox to actually create a newsstand within the metaverse where individuals who are walking around can grab a newspaper, much like you would just walking down the street. But why is this important? Because it's allowing you to get the news in real time, and the newspaper itself will automatically update. So you can read it while you're kind of interacting and walking around kind of the sandbox, we'll say ecosystem, so to speak, which hopefully will be interoperable with kind of the various other ecosystems. But from that, I will say though, to be completely honest, from just a pure kind of advertising perspective, and we're calling print and digital, from a use case perspective, that I think is at the bottom of the list from those who are kind of developing the metaverse side. And we do need to think about how we actually make that from a more engaging perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. So the last question I'll ask you before we actually jump to the questions from the audience, right? So what is the most important lesson you've learned over the career and the collaboration with different creators? Maybe name top three.
Okay, there's a few here. The number one, which you may laugh at, is for me being an agent and having working with so many influencers among different age groups, etc., is number one, answer your emails. There's oftentimes when you're working with big brands and you're working just with an agent, there are opportunities that are coming, and you'd be shocked at not to say anything mean, but the lack of awareness from actually responding to brand opportunities and deliverables and just opportunities generally. Check your email and please respond is number one.
Or hire a good
Always,
executive assistant, right?
Yes, good to have an assistant, or just dedicate, half hour in the morning, then half hour in the evening to check it. Because I know schedules of influencers are very, very tight. They're streaming all day, then they're doing brand activations, etc. But to be successful, you have to be professional. And, fortunately and unfortunately, which is both, a blessing and a curse of the influencer industry, is generally speaking, influencers start at a very young age, right? Anywhere from 15, 16 years old. And it's hard to develop those skills when you're, barely in high school, so to speak. And then secondly, outside of that, persistence and patience is super important. So being an influencer, as again, I'm sure all listeners know, it's one of the most competitive industries there is. There's virtually no barrier to entry. All you really need is a cell phone or a computer, and you can effectively start creating content. It's a super competitive market. Everyone wants to do it. No one really wants to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a teacher anymore. Everyone wants to be, you know, a TikTok influencer or an Instagram influencer or now a Metaverse influencer. And it's not as glamorous as it seems. And it's a grind, but if you're truly dedicated and you're patient and you're persistent with the content you're putting out, odds are you'll be successful. So kind of the key lessons I've learned are really kind of, you know, be professional, answer those emails, and persistence and patience.
So the regular basic things, which are time management and ethical commitment.
And it's funny enough, because like those basic things and the simple things are what's most often overlooked.
Got it. That makes sense. I totally understand what you're saying, and yeah. So thank you for the answers, right, for this part. So now it's time for our audience to write all the questions and the live chat near this video. So you can do it from Twitter Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, whenever you're connecting from, right? So you know we're expecting like to hear relevant questions to this particular show. So I will start from the first. I already see about 10 to 15, so we'll go one by one. So Captain Huddle from YouTube is asking, what inspired you to build the Metaverse Insider? Are you happy with what you have accomplished so far? And what plans do you have for the future?
I think that's a great question. So the Metaverse Insider really kind of spawned out of kind of an overview of the market. I was always really interested in kind of the Metaverse since I started hearing about it a couple of years ago. And the opportunity that I saw was, what was funny enough, you had all this money that was flowing into the space. Then you had basically what was news really in the form of press releases that were basically alluding to, you know, company X raises capital, company X has X technological development. But what I found weird was there wasn't really any material publication that was dedicated to, we'll say, the business and commercial applications of Metaverse technology. So when I saw that, and you know, given the opportunity within the Metaverse, I wanted to get involved. I thought, you know, here's kind of a low-hanging fruit or an easy entry point for me to get in, given my marketing and media experience, to create a platform for companies, stakeholders, and those who are interested to share their message and meaning. Am I happy with where they are or where we are yet? It's a tough one. You know, as a founder, just as you are, Constantin, you're never pleased, you're never satisfied, probably being always a little bit too hard on ourselves. But yeah, like I think we're in a very good spot. We're luckily in some respects agnostic to the development of the technology, which is something that I like. But, you know, we can always improve. We're a very young company. We've only been around for about 2 years now. It's growing well. We've partnered with various companies across the space, but you can always do better. And, you know, hopefully we'll improve. And, you know, if people go around, use our website, please email me and let me know how we can improve and how we can better kind of provide that information in a more meaningful way.
Perfect. Thank you for this answer. So Clan Wars from YouTube is asking, hi, Evan. What criteria do you take into consideration when you choose which Metaverse project you want to support and help to grow?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So lucky for me, I have a very good team of journalists. As you can imagine, we get inbound press releases virtually every day. The vast majority of them are quite shallow and have very little actual meaning. They're just trying to keep that brand equity going and share those messages. We typically will not share information that doesn't have any substance. As long as we get information from a press release perspective or a news perspective that has actual substance that our readers will value, and again, goes back to those values of, again, business and commercial applications, generally we will share it. And we will do exclusive interviews and delve deeper into kind of those projects. If you're looking for, you know, let's find out the best metaverse that has like a token, that sort of thing, that's not who we are. We're very much focused on building a very, very material ecosystem for the long run. And with that, we only will share news on those who are really developing actual projects like GamesPad.
Thank you. Block Jelly from YouTube is asking, the most important thing for an influencer should be the community, right? And I feel like it has become even more critical now. How did the Web3 impact influencers in terms of their engagement with fans?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's something we touched on earlier. Community is obviously the most important thing. It's the most important thing for any brand, being their consumers. It's the most important thing for any influencer, being their audience. And it's the most important thing for any company, essentially, that's developing. So what the Metaverse is really providing is kind of another distribution channel to really engage with those community members who are actually supportive and fans of you. So it's taking that kind of break in the fourth wall that we discussed before to a whole new level, because it's allowing you to meaningfully interact with them in almost a place that, in the foreseeable future, will be a ancillary lifestyle to actual reality. So in that sense, if you're a fan, if I'm an influencer and you're one of my fans, we can actually go out and have a virtual drink in the metaverse and discuss things. And that's a very priceless thing, and something that I think will meaningfully help the development of communities for brands as well as influencers.
Perfect. So Omar from YouTube is asking you, hi Evan, got a question. How did Web3 impact the competition between influencers, and how do brands make collaboration agreements with them? Are there new ways of displaying featured items?
Yeah, so that's another really good question. So let me give actually an example. First, like how first brands are kind of entering the metaverse and making these agreements with various influencers. So we are working right now with a very large poker brand. I can't give the name, but what we're actually doing is developing, we'll say, a casino, a poker casino within one of the biggest metaverses. And what we're doing then is creating a NFT. And this NFT is going to essentially be your ticket to participate in poker tournaments within the casino. 100% of the proceeds from the sale of NFTs are going to the prize pool for the poker tournaments. So in a way, if you're spending $100 on an NFT, you'll effectively be entered into be able to participate in poker tournaments where prize pools can be upwards of $5 million. Now that is very significant and a very good utility of how the metaverse can act as an alternative way to get people together and activate a brand in that space outside of a physical location in reality. Now, how are they leveraging influencers? They are working with large influencers and large poker influencers to so basically promote that this is happening, as well as participate in those tournaments. Now, imagine yourself as kind of a young amateur poker player, and you were enter into this tournament. You can immediately be sitting next to one of your favorite players, being, let's say, Phil Ivey, who's one of the world's best poker players, and competing against him for one of these large prize pools, et cetera. And of course, it has real world utilities, like being able to meet and greet with these individuals as well. So that's kind of a summary of how I would best approach it. And what was that first part of the question that I forgot? I think I didn't touch on that well.
No, I think, I mean, we already talked about it. The first part was actually like, about the competition between influencers. I guess like who's winning attention, and how do you structure it to make sure that maybe he means like measuring engagement, right? And also making sure that they're winning. Because, right, like in crypto, in bull market, what's happening, like brands are fighting for the big influencers. And bear market, it's vice versa, right? So I think that's also another tool to make sure, because it's much harder to actually put a tracker and measure conversions in the metaverse, right?
Mm-hmm. You're 100% right, and it's actually really difficult to track that normally as well, just in kind of Twitter, YouTube, etc. But one thing which there's this company that I know that is developing this is leveraging blockchain to track KPIs for influencer activations within the metaverse. So they're using that. So they're doing things like leveraging both tokens as well as NFTs, not in the sense that, okay, I'm going to go sell this token or I'm going to go sell this NFT, but those audience members who receive one of those tokens or receive one of those NFTs as one of the criteria showing the fact that they engage with that brand on that day through the influencer. So it's a way to track.
Got it. I think that's an interesting point. Raphael from YouTube is asking, hi, Evan, when do you expect to see some macro influencers such as Kardashians promoting their brands in the metaverse? Are there any big names in the space?
Yeah, I think you're already seeing a lot of big names who are leveraging the metaverse from a brand perspective in terms of like Kardashians and other ones. I think still it comes down to the fact that the technology is it's still somewhat in its infancy, and brand reputation, authenticity is super important. And just I hate to say it, just given what is going on in the market right now, a lot of influencers are shying away just a little bit from connecting themselves, we'll say, with NFT and crypto kind of projects. Unlike, a year ago where virtually they were engaging with all of them. Having said that, I don't necessarily pool metaverse with those things. Metaverse itself is a technology to me, and it's not necessarily, a project, we'll say.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, listen, Snoop Dogg is a big name enough, I think. So,
and you saw recently Snoop Dogg and Eminem, they performed a kind of a concert in the metaverse, and too. Travis Scott did one last year with Fortnite, which is fully a metaverse in and of itself. So you're already seen influencers come in. It's just a matter of where are the brands. A lot of brands are in that discovery phase right now, and as more of them come in, you'll see the influencers come in as well.
Got it.
Influencers will go where the money goes and where their fans go.
100%. OVZ from YouTube is asking, I see that you're very interested in esports, and are there any examples of esport influencers in Web3? Is it possible to build a personal brand as an influencer in the esport niche?
Yeah, so from an esports perspective, right, we're talking about competitive gaming. And what a lot of individuals do is they actually conflate esports with just gaming as a whole. Like Red Dead Redemption, God of War, these kind of AAA titles, they're not esports, right? When we're talking esports, we're thinking of Dota, League of Legends, Call of Duty, and these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. I do see an opportunity for esports to play a significant role in the metaverse. I haven't seen it yet. But once kind of, again, going back to this, I know I'm harping on a lot, the technology further develops where we can have more of those competitive titles being playable within the metaverse, that's when you're going to see that huge transition from an esports perspective and a lot of those individuals moving over to that space.
Okay. I have a provocative question from Moxie from YouTube. Do you see yourself as an influencer? If so, why? If not, why not? I think the term doesn't have to be clear definition, but it should. How do you define an influencer from Web3 viewpoint?
Yeah, okay. So me, am I an influencer? Absolutely not. I think one of the criteria is you actually have to have some sort of a following. I have no following, and that is a lot of that is by design. While I may be somewhat of a personal individual, I'm not necessarily into promoting myself that much on social media. I don't really do brand deals. I like facilitating the brand deals more than anything else. And what is an influencer? It's really an open-ended question. It is to kind of that individual, whoever they are. It's really someone who can, whether you're micro or you're macro, it doesn't matter. But what an influencer is to me is an individual who can harness an audience and engage with them and share a meaningful message. And that's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. Even if it's, whether it's 5 people or whether it's 5 million people or anywhere in between, you're an influencer, I think by definition, as long as you're sharing something in just a material and meaningful way, an engaging way. It's a very difficult thing to kind of define, but it's it's something that is open-ended.
I would agree. I mean,
that was a tough one. That was a tough one to answer.
It is a tough one. If I would gauge also like on this, like I think any person who so there are people who have only 5,000 followers that they're more influential than people with like 50,000 or 500,000, right? It's also about like what's your engagement rate and what type of people are following you, right? So you can be a micro influencer, but the people who respect you in real life, they actually follow you in real life, not in Instagram. Yeah. So that's a huge difference, right?
And going back to your first point, that's actually something I learned very early on in my career. So we cut a couple fairly significant brand deals with large influencers, and the brands were upset because the campaigns didn't hit the KPIs that they were expecting. And then as we started kind of growing and we were starting, really analyzing those KPIs and, why wasn't this hit, and then what we did was what we found out is leveraging, let's say 5 micro influencers versus 1 larger influencers. Oftentimes those 5 micros, even though they have a significantly smaller following than the 1 large person, will actually hit those KPIs much better. And the reason being is because the large influencer tends to have a very, very, very diverse audience. And that's not a bad thing, but it's not the best thing when you're a very specific brand and you're trying to hit a very specific target demographic. So when you're working with those 5 influencers, their fans or audience tends to be highly engaged and highly relevant to the content that they're producing. So the brands themselves were better able to connect with those audiences and reach those KPIs.
And I want to just throw another like interesting scientific part notion that I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Dunbar number. Like it's a suggested cognitive limit of the number of people with whom one can maintain very close relationships, and it's actually 150 people. So if you think about like from the theory of relativity, like like the 5 people, even they're smaller, but they're 150 people from those 5. They have better chances to leverage more because they still like, maybe it's not 150, maybe it's 50, but still it's a dedicated people who actually really, really follow you, right? As opposed to a bigger one who have wider circles. And yes, they respect him, they love his content, but the closed circle, the small one that actually will engage actively will be smaller, right? So by definition. So listen, I'm sure we can talk about this part like really long. I enjoy it, but I think I will ask you the last question from the audience, if you don't mind. And then, so Malvenis from YouTube, I hope I pronounced it well, is asking, are extensive broadcasting services such as Twitch getting into Web3? Do you think there will be significant changes in how influencers promote their lifestyles and products regarding companies and technologies?
Yeah. So fundamentally, I think every single company right now that is consumer facing is developing a Web3 and Metaverse strategy. That goes without saying. I speak to brands every single day, and it comes up on virtually every call. Some companies are much more advanced in kind of their pursuits. Some have even hired, specialists within those companies to lead those divisions, whereas others are just beginning to kind of touch the surface and see what are the opportunities here and how can I best kind of position myself for this future that is, like I said before, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So how can I best position myself for when this comes? And, from that sense, yes, Twitch, they are definitely developing a strategy. I know them quite well. I can confirm that they are kind of, working on something there. They haven't necessarily shared that with me, so I don't know what that is and how they plan to do it, but they are doing it. And I'm sure we'll know quite soon, just being a very much a digital media company that works in the influencer space. You can rest assured that they are developing a significant strategy as it relates to it. And the second part of the question was really about, okay, how can influencers really do it? I think we touched on that a little bit before, but again, it's really just a matter of identifying with a brand. What do you want to achieve? And then now, what is the technology that I have in front of me that I can leverage to actually present this in a way that makes sense? So if I'm an influencer, I want to work on the metaverse. One, do your best to become an expert in it. And even though no one really is an expert in it yet, because we don't necessarily know exactly what it is or what it will be, we have an idea of that, but it's still very much in its development. So everyone, including influencers and companies, just need to essentially get ready for that time.
Yeah, no, I 100% support your viewpoint. Listen, thank you everyone for joining GamesHUB today. Thank you for your questions, and we really enjoy bringing more guests like Evan, like we're knowledgeable, like they're smart, they can help us to really build this understanding of the next level. What are we expecting from Web3 technologies, and listen us like every week at 3 p.m. UTC on YouTube Live and all other platforms. So Thursday, every other 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll see Evan again on our show. But for today, thank you so much again for the questions. Thank you for the answers, Evan, and so would really love to work with you in the future.
Thanks so much for having me. I had a great time. And if anyone wants to reach out, if anyone has any questions, you can always email me and I'd be happy to chat.
Yeah, and we feel free, once we post this episode, you will be able to write additional questions that we haven't been able to voice out in the comment section, and I'm sure Evan will allocate a few minutes of his precious time to answer.
100%. 100%.
Thank you so much, Evan, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.